The following is a conversation with Chris Burns, CEO of First Atlantic Commerce, one of the biggest payment gateway providers in the Caribbean and Latin America. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
To introduce myself fully for your listeners and watchers that don't know me in the Caribbean, my name is Chris Burns. I'm the CEO of First Atlantic Commerce. And First Atlantic Commerce is first and foremost an e-commerce payment gateway company. So our job is to provide effectively the connectivity, the technical connectivity between a merchant's website and a bank and their processor, which ultimately will connect into the Visa, MasterCard, Amex interchange network to be able to then route that real-time transaction to the bank that issued that credit card that's trying to do the transaction. And then ultimately, if there's funds available, capture those funds, put a hold on those funds, and respond back through that transaction string to the website to say, yes, you can accept that transaction for our merchants. So that is taking a very vast network and kind of boiling it down very, very quickly. And it's one of these industries that until you get into it, you don't really realize how complicated it is. I joined FAC nearly 19 years ago, and I've worked in various capacities at the company over that time. And when I first joined and I was trying to get my arms around the industry itself, I was amazed by how much happens in the background. I've used cards all my life, and never really thought about what happens when I swipe my card. There was no tap back then. There was barely internet. Just starting, and we were one of the first companies, certainly within the region, that was providing online authorization services for websites. So, back then, it was, you were looking at what we call a payment processor. So big names you'd recognize now would be people like Fiserv or Global Payments. TSYS is now part of Global Payments, but EPX, HPS Power Card, and the interfaces to those are actually, and still are, very complicated. So our job within that ecosystem is to provide all of those integrations to the processors, and then provide a very simple API or hosted payment page or shopping cart integration to allow merchants to get up and running online very, very quickly. So in that 22 years, we've worked in Europe, we've worked in the US, we've done a bit in Canada, even far afield as Mauritius, actually. And then we retasked and focused specifically on the Caribbean and Central America about 9 years ago. So at that time, we were only working with Scotiabank, and we were doing a few merchants, but we saw there was a lot of desire to get into e-commerce and grow the e-commerce economy within the Caribbean and Central America. But there weren't really a lot of providers that were focusing on the region. Yeah. And when you live on an island nation, sometimes it's very hard to get the attention of the bigger players, like the Microsofts or the authorized.nets or whoever that might be. So trying to get them to pay attention to what is geographically a small territory, there wasn't a lot of e-commerce business at the time, so the transaction volume was quite low. So we felt that there was a large opportunity there to be able to support that that demand, but also with an understanding of what it is to be in this region. So we took all our technology, which is comparable to any of the big names that you would care to mention from a gateway perspective, and apply that specifically for the Caribbean and Central America. And so fast forward 9 years, we're connected to just about every e-commerce acquiring bank within the Caribbean. So all the big Canadian banks like RBC, CIBC, Scotiabank, and then all the big domestic banks in bigger countries like Jamaica, so NCB, First Global, and then BNTB in Bermuda and Cayman, First Citizens in Trinidad, Republic Bank in Trinidad, and now Republic has actually grown and acquired a bunch of these territories from Scotiabank, certainly within the Eastern Caribbean. So they are in a number of different countries now, including Guyana and Barbados and Suriname, and then all the Eastern Caribbean countries they acquired from Scotiabank as well. And then we work all through Central America, from Panama up to, but not including Mexico. And so we work with BAC Credematic through all those countries, which is the largest e-commerce acquirer within that region as well. So we are, I guess, a relatively large player in a small geography, I guess is the way we put it. So, and we focus predominantly on that. And that's why I think people like to work with us, because, we have great technology, we have great customer service, we're focused on the region, we don't treat it as a sort of an afterthought, as it were. And everything we develop and design and support is specifically for the region.
From your perspective, when we look at market adoption, what would you say is the main hurdle? Is it the tech side of things, or is it more the regulatory side, or maybe even the hesitation from a bank side to offer the connection or the services?
Well, I think that's changed over time. So originally it was the tech. So there weren't a lot of options for people to build their websites, to get connectivity to some of the major shopping carts that were out there, like Shopify or Wix or WooCommerce or Magento, or because all the gateways that were plugged into those were servicing North America or Europe, right, and they weren't connected technically to or certified to any of the banks or processes within the region. So that was the first hurdle. And then once we had solved for that and provided all that connectivity and the technology, the next piece was certainly working with the banks. So, a lot of the banks had not been in e-commerce before, and even their counterparts in say Canada, for example, hadn't necessarily had a lot of experience with e-commerce. So there was a lot of, there was a very conservative approach to underwriting e-commerce merchant accounts. So in our region, up until quite recently, there have been no payment facilitators, no PSPs, no sort of Stripe or PayPal or Adyen type setups. So every time, and still is most of the case, every time you want to get an e-commerce merchant account from the bank, you have to apply directly to the bank. And it's same like kind of getting a corporate account with a loan facility attached to it. So that's the level of KYC and AML documentation that you have to provide within there. So, your corporate accounts, your incorporation documentation, your business plan, your funding, source of funding, and then all about the individuals that are involved in the company as well. So it is quite a lot of paperwork, but all the banks are having to play by the same rules. So all the compliance and the KYC is the same across each bank. So, and that can present a challenge when it comes to the sort of micro and smaller merchants, because they don't have necessarily that infrastructure. There are a lot of people within the Caribbean that run their businesses from WhatsApp. And, so, when you come, and that's not to say that they don't have a great product or service. It's just, the corporate infrastructure is not there. It's maybe somebody's side job or something they do at the weekends. And then if you want to accept payments, you have to go through this process with the banks. And the banks have got a lot better, and they do want to do the business, contrary to, what some people might say within the region. There's a lot of commentary that says the banks don't want to do the business, they make it too complicated, they don't want to deal with small merchants. And that might have been the case a number of years ago, but certainly, during this last 18 months, the viewpoint on that has changed dramatically. So, you mentioned WePay earlier, for example. So they're a client of ours. So we power the credit card processing piece of WePay on the back end. And WePay have done a great job in terms of providing simple infrastructure and technology for sort of smaller merchants to be able to get up and running online quickly. So they are what we would call the first sort of payment facilitator within the region, that's not directly a bank. Of course, they have a bank relationship on the back end to be able to support that, but they have signed up thousands of merchants, smaller merchants, to be able to help them get online quickly, and they underwrite that. So that's been a really important part of the e-commerce adoption, within the region, even so pre-COVID, and then obviously the last 18-20 months have changed the viewpoint on e-commerce dramatically. So we had, prior to that, and we still see it here today in Bermuda, this sort of stand-in-line culture when it comes to banking. Even though, most of what people are going to the bank for, you can do electronically these days, whether it's depositing cash or checks, if people are still using checks or whatever that might be, but it's ingrained in our culture within our region, and that's part of it. So, that has changed again dramatically over the last 18, 20 months. So, people have been forced into the technology. And once that's happened, people really are like, okay, well, actually, this is not that scary. We can
nice. Yeah.
Exactly. This is better. The experience is better. And even for me, somebody that I never go into a bank unless I absolutely have to. But even things like the online shopping, like supermarkets in Bermuda, that wasn't really a big thing. It was starting to get going before COVID, and we'd supported a bunch of supermarket initiatives here and in the Caribbean, full Caribbean too. But and I hadn't really experienced it much myself. But the fact that I can just order everything online, drive up, have it put in the back of my car, not have to drag my kids around the supermarket, it's just such a much more pleasurable experience. And I think a lot of people have experienced that right across the board, whether it's having food delivered or shopping or paying their bills, the utility bills or their phone bills. Realizing that, okay, actually I can do this. It's quick, it's easy. I can do it whenever I want. I don't have to be, tied down to when the physical store is open or not. And it's just been a dramatic change and a massive injection of confidence in the industry, facilitated by COVID.
Talking about change, from your perspective, what are the countries, maybe especially over the last 18 months since COVID hit, that took the biggest change or the biggest steps forwards in terms of online payments? Are there significant differences, or is it like through the bank?
Yeah, there are differences, and the different banks have taken different approaches to it. So if you mentioned your tie to Jamaica before, somebody like NCB, for example, have been very aggressive in terms of pushing their e-commerce agenda, and have put a lot of time and energy and promotion into that. And we can see that through just the number of clients that we set up for them, for example. And Jamaica in general, I think, has been, within the region, one of the countries that has been at the forefront of trying to embrace the digital economy. Whether that's standard e-commerce, whether it's opening up the sandbox environment to test all different sort of financial technologies. WePay, just you mentioned before, moved their headquarters to Jamaica. There are a lot of tech companies there. There's a lot of outsourcing companies that have been set up in Jamaica as well. There's a lot of good software development skills in Jamaica. A lot of people that have come up, and you can get a lot of excellent developer resource or technical know-how within Jamaica. Trinidad's been the same, I find. I think the legislation is a bit more developed in Jamaica than it would be in Trinidad, for example. Mm-hmm. But again, the level of knowledge and talent that you can get there is very strong. And then you see, companies like BIT coming out of Barbados, which, are central bank digital currency solutions. So they've been very strong in that space. So Dcash is something that's come up within the Eastern Caribbean in terms of, digitizing the fiat currency, central bank issued. And also in Bahamas, you've seen Sandals come in. So, there is a lot of demand to understand those technologies and figure out, how do we implement those within the region? How do we financially include more people? And which of these technologies is best going to support us to do that? Is it cryptocurrency? Is it a stable coin? Is it digitizing the fiat currency? Working with the central banks? And there's just going to be, I think, we're going to go through this period of a little bit of trial and error, certainly. So, okay, well, which ones do I do? Because I know the region has felt excluded financially for a very long time. And, it's expensive to send wires, countries getting put on blacklists, and it's been frustrating. The region is frustrated with that, and they're trying to work out other technologies and other solutions that are going to make transacting and sending money and sharing money easier and better.
Yeah, I agree with the exclusion part, and I think that is, or was, and probably still is, a big, kind of break for economic growth, or slows it down in a lot of areas. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about a practical approach, because when I understand you right, in the past or let's say, I think enterprise level hasn't had or was probably one of the first adopters in online payment solutions. Maybe you can guide me a little bit through the process, or your recommendation for a medium-sized business, let's say retail. Let's say we make $1 million US in revenue per year, and we're deciding, okay, we need the e-commerce solution, and we have to make two big decisions. What will be the web solution, the e-commerce shop, if you want to call it, and we need a payment processor. So is there a specific e-commerce solution or system that you would recommend? We talked about WooCommerce, we talked about Magento, we've talked about Shopify, and what would be the process from there?
Yeah, so what I always say is think payments first, and that's not just because I'm a payment gateway company and the CEO of one of those companies. It's specifically because of the region and the connectivity on the back end. And so we've seen it time and time again over the years that people will go website first and will buy a shopping cart or whatever that might be, and then they build it. It looks amazing, but then when they come to accepting payments, it only connects to like authorize.net or PayPal, none of which connect directly to any of the banks within our region. So there's been this huge outlay of cash and time. And then, when the actual sort of lifeblood of the website in terms of being able to get paid for anything you're selling doesn't work. So that's the first thing that we always encourage people to look at. And we have a lot of connectivity now to most of the major shopping carts. So we have worked with local software development companies like WebGold, for example, out of Trinidad, that have built plugins for the major shopping carts: Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento. And then we've worked with other companies more recently, like TiloPay, which is based out of Costa Rica, and they have added Wix, for example. So we're one of the first providers within the region to actually support payments for Wix within our region, which is, again, a hugely popular site for building your website, accepting payments, and then we support the payment processing. So we power the payments for companies like Figaro, for example. Again, essential, it's a Costa Rican-based company, but design their solutions in terms of payment buttons, e-invoicing, website builder, specifically for the Caribbean and Central America. So, all these, we would, encourage people to look at, okay, what exactly are you looking to build? Who are you looking to service? Are you looking to service, what you're just domestically, across the Caribbean, internationally, outside of there, and then work backwards from there in terms of, okay, well, do I want to build my own website? Do I have the capital for that? Do I know the right software developers that can help me do that? Or do I want to get something off the shelf? Do I want to go to like a WordPress site or a Shopify or a Wix? And I think a lot of people are going that direction within the Caribbean. They are not necessarily building their own site, but they're leveraging, some of these platforms that are fantastic. I'll give you an example. So Wix. For my parents have a, art conservation business. They were locked down. They're not very computer literate, being in their 70s. And I went into Wix. I'd never built a website before in my life, even though I've been in the industry before. I had something up and running that looks amazing within hour and a half. Yeah. And that's how quickly you can build something. So I would certainly encourage people to look at all the different options. And if they don't know where to start within the Caribbean, come and talk to us, because we have 20 odd years experience within the region. We know who all the banks are within the different countries. We have the right contact at the bank. So I think sometimes people get a frustrating experience because they'll go into a bank and go ask a teller, for example, I want to set up an e-commerce merchant account. And that's obviously the wrong person to ask, right? And so they go, and sometimes they'll say, well, we don't do that, or I don't know who to talk to. Right. So we will plug people in directly to the right teams and individuals to start that process. So you start off on the right foot. And then we can make recommendations on software developers, let them know which shopping carts we work with, what different integration methods we can support, what other tools we have within that as well. Things like recurring payments or tokenization or anti-fraud platforms that we connect to, and we can help people work through their technology strategy to do that. So that's, it's a bit of a long-winded answer to thing, but if people just feel like they don't know where to start, they can come and talk to us, and we just know the region really well, and we can point them in the right direction so they don't make any of those mistakes up front.
Okay, I want to dive deeper into that in a second, but just to recap. So what you were saying, when I understand you correctly, is someone that has the capital to code their own website or shopping cart probably has all the capacity to build the integration by themselves and connect to a payment processor, either that's you or someone else. Yeah. And all the major off-the-shelf solution, and you mentioned some of them, Shopify, Wix, and so on, that there are now not native integrations yet, but there are plugins available on the market, and maybe even from local vendors that kind of connect you to the Shopify store or Wix account or whatever it might be. Is that correct so far?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Because if you want to integrate directly, we have a direct API, for example, that you can come into, or we have a hosted payment page option. And usually that is sort of more the medium to larger size merchants, because they want a bit more flexibility around what they're developing. Okay.
So maybe you can guide us a little bit to let's say the onboarding process. Let's assume I decide that you guys are the right starting point, and I call you and say, hey Chris, I get my $1 million in revenue. I want to process my payments through you guys. I don't have an e-commerce solution yet. Maybe you can help me with that. What would be the next steps? What kind of legal documents do I need? How long do I have to wait till everything is working? How high are implementation costs? What is your fee structure, and so on? Maybe you can give us a little introduction here.
Yeah, certainly. So once we get that intro or phone call or first email, one of the first questions we're going to ask is, which bank do they want to work with, and have they already started the application process for an e-commerce merchant account? If they haven't, then we will introduce them directly to the right person at that bank in that country to start that process. Because generally what we ask people to do is, have that process completed with the bank first. Because you don't want to start spending money on a technical integration if for whatever reason you haven't been approved by the bank to have an e-commerce merchant account. Okay. And just to be clear, so the e-commerce merchant account is completely different from a personal account, corporate account, even a point of sale merchant account. Its sole function is to receive funds that have been captured from online transactions. But it is a very specific account that you have to apply for with the bank. So once they go through that process, the setup with us is relatively straightforward. So we'll have the conversation with the client to figure out which method they want to use to integrate to us. So if it's one of the shopping cart plugins, we'll direct them to the provider that has built the plugin so they can purchase that plugin, and it's sort of a snap in, and then no further integration work is required. Then we will, depending on which bank they work with, we will either have a direct contract with the merchant, or if it's a bank like Republic Bank or First Citizens in Trinidad, or NCB in Jamaica, for example, those merchants will get all their pricing directly from the bank. So because we have a direct contractual relationship with the bank. So we we don't bill the merchant directly. But any of the other banks that we work with, we will tend to have a contract directly with the merchant. So there'll be a small setup fee. There will be a transaction fee, and that's usually dependent on volume. So we charge.
It's from the bank side. Sorry for interrupting.
Depending which bank. So if it's someone like Republic Bank or First Citizens or NCB, all the fees will be charged directly by the bank.
Okay.
If it's Scotia, RBC, CIBC, for example, or any of the banks here in Bermuda, we will charge our fees directly to the merchant. So the way that we work with our banks varies. So we are either, a third-party provider that, we will provide the solution to their clients, but we will have a direct contractual relationship with those clients as well and support them directly. Some of our other bank clients prefer to have an all-in-one solution that they offer to the merchants. And so we have our contractual relationship with the bank. So it varies depending on what the bank is looking for. And that's what and our services either range from just, okay, we're a gateway partner of the bank, through to we will help the bank get set up for e-commerce for the first time, and help them run their program, provide the technology, provide consulting in terms of how that's done. So we can cater to whatever the bank needs from that perspective. But to go back to setting up with us, once that merchant account is approved, we will move into support mode for that merchant. So we will provide them access to a test account, sort of a sandbox type environment where they can test the integration, whether it's through the plugin or they're doing a direct integration through the API or the hosted payment page. And then we will make sure that all the transaction types are working as they should do. So like an authorization and the capture of the funds, refunds, reversals, recurring payments if they're using that type of setup, depending on the type of business, the anti-fraud platform. So we partner with Count, which is now an Equifax company. And so it's a very sophisticated anti-fraud platform that we can help provide too. And then we'll also help with website reviews to make sure that, the terms and conditions are there, refund policies, the different card logos, everything is moving smoothly through the website as per the recommendations from the card associations, Visa, MasterCard, Amex. And then at that point, we will have done a full test transaction from the website to make sure the funds hit their merchant account. And at that point, we hand back over to the merchant and bank and say, everything from our perspective looks good. So we believe that the merchant is ready to go live. And then after that, we are there to provide technical support on anything to do with the gateway and the sort of real-time transaction processing. Anything on the sort of settlement of funds or, where's my money type questions, the merchant is directed to the bank. We don't have visibility of that. We don't control the money. We don't actually technically ever have the money from that perspective, because we're not a facilitator. We're not not an aggregator. We're a technology partner. So we're never really holding any of the merchant's funds.
So that would be my next question. How long does it take? Let's say I pay on your parents' Wix store now, and how long would it take if that would be processed for you? Would that be rely on the bank primarily from the time frame?
Yeah, it is, and it's usually, but it's quite standard. So it's either two or 3 days to hit the account. And so it's usually paid every business day, but 2 or 3 days in arrears. So there's none of this issue with, funds held for weeks or months. Right. Because I think some people in the region have tried to work out a PayPal solution or maybe a Stripe solution, which if you can get it to work, it's okay. It would only be US dollar for a start. And then the funds will settle in the US, and then you've got to repatriate those back into the country. So you're paying wire fees to do that. And it's not really a smooth experience.
It's a cash flow risk for a lot of businesses.
It is. And I think what we're trying to do as well is we're trying to grow the local economies. We're not trying to bleed money out of the system
Yeah.
into another country. So, yes, I can understand why people get frustrated with the bank sometimes and all the rest of it. We've had a lot of these conversations where people will say, okay, well, I can't do this because I can't use PayPal, I can't use Stripe, so I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
My message to everybody is we have everything we need within the Caribbean and the Central America region to be able to successfully launch an online business. We have the developers, we have the banks, we have the processes, we have the gateways, we have the knowledge base now within the region, we have the desire to do it. And so you can get whatever you want to do that successfully, to launch a successful online business within our region now. That excuse is no longer there. We can do it. And there are thousands of merchants, just on our platform that can demonstrate that they can do it.
Why do you think that people sometimes still hesitating, even in today's environment?
I think it can be daunting. If you don't know anything about it, about e-commerce or the technology or logistics on the back end of it, I think, when you look at it from 10,000 feet, it can seem a bit daunting sometimes. But we have a lot of companies now within the region that can help you, focus on the important aspects of it and help you through that. So, I'll give you, like Figure is a great example for local solution, because, it's already integrated from a gateway perspective, for a payments perspective. It's integrated to DHL, so in terms of, shipping and logistics, you can take just the payment button aspect of it and drop that into WhatsApp if you're running a WhatsApp business, and just use that. You can, if you're a service provider and you want to send an e-invoice with a payment button in it, you can use that function. And then you can scale up to a full web shop. So you don't necessarily have to spend thousands of dollars anymore developing a fancy e-commerce website. If that's not what you need, I still recommend everybody has a website, because you need to be searchable. Right. But if you don't need to add all the other payment functionality and logistics into the website, and you just need to get paid online simply, via a payment button or an invoice, then you can do that too. Servicemen, like plumbers, electricians, etc., they don't necessarily want to spend all that time and energy on building an e-commerce enabled website.
Right.
They want something that says, this is what we do, this is how to contact us. But after the job, you want to be able to send an invoice and have it be an active invoice, instead of one that just sits in somebody's inbox for 90 days and they forget to pay it because they have to log onto their internet banking or send a check or whatever it is. If it has a payment button in it, you click it right then and there, the customer adds the contact details, you get paid 2 days later, and then it updates the system to say you've been paid. So, I think I still think there's some, and it's changing rapidly now. There's a generational issue, right? Where certain people won't change. They want cash, they want checks, right, and they're going to operate in that manner. But as the generations come through, and everybody starts to live their life on a 5-inch screen, that's what everybody expects, right, to be able to buy, purchase, sell, transfer money from your phone. But also historically, there has been an issue with credit card penetration within the region, and still so. Credit card ownership within the Caribbean is very low. Right. It's still only 15 to 25%, depending on where you are in the region. It's a very heavily cash-based economy still. But yeah, and then you take Jamaica and Trinidad, which have local loop debit cards. So you have the Links card in Jamaica, or multi-link card. You have the Linked network in Trinidad, which historically have been magstripe pin-based cards that don't work online. You can only use them at the ATM or at a physical point of sale machine. But now they're being branded. So they're getting a Visa or a MasterCard logo on them, which means you can suddenly use those online. So Trinidad, for example, huge. You're taking 80% of the population that never had access to a card that you can use online, suddenly being able to use it online. So the opportunity there is massive.
So let's talk about numbers a little bit, because I think you have a lot of insight into different industries and in different businesses. What should be, or what is maybe you can give a rough estimate or average. What would be the upfront investment for the setup? Because there are some costs for a business, maybe a developer here or some support from your side, whatever it might be. That would be question one. Then question two, is there a certain minimum, let's say, revenue amount per year that a business should have on a regular basis to say, okay, now it actually makes sense to offer online payment solution? What is your experience in that regard?
Yeah, the upfront costs will really depend on what you're trying to build. So if you just want to purchase a plugin, for example, for Shopify or WooCommerce or Wix, whatever, you're looking at a license fee of sub $300 a year for the plugin, and then you are whatever your fees are to like Wix or Shopify, because they're going to have different fees themselves for using their platform, and that will vary depending on which platform you're going to use and which of their services you're going to use within there. So you need to take that into consideration, and then you're going to have a per tran fee from us, which is going to be somewhere between 10 and 18 cents, depending on what your volume is, per transaction. And then you're going to look at a bank fee for their e-commerce merchant account, which is usually going to be a percentage of the transaction. And that again will vary by bank, but also on volume and risk profile of your business. So the bank will charge X% per transaction for that. There might be a monthly support fee or minimum that can range between $100 to $180 a month on the processing. So there are some minimum fees in there that you have to cover. So if you're not doing a few hundred a month in transaction volume, you might want to consider what you're doing. So but there are different ways to approach that now too, because there's a lot of marketplaces that have popped up within the Caribbean. And this is what we're seeing in, especially like Trinidad, for example. There's been 30 new marketplaces arrive. And Jamaica has them too, like Carib Shopper and Cool Market and companies like this that are setting up to be basically an Amazon. I don't want to say Amazon completely, but it's more tailored to the local economy and the diaspora. So for example, you mentioned your wife's Jamaican, and if she's missing something from Jamaica, you can go into Cool Market, and there's a lot of local vendors that are selling local products, and you can get those quite easily now. So as a sole trader, you can go to these marketplaces, sign an agreement with them, and then get your individual products listed on their website, and you haven't had to do any of the setup. You haven't had to get the merchant account. You haven't had to do the software development. You're not doing any of the customer support really, and worrying about the gateways. So that's a fantastic solution for small merchants within the region. So if you are only selling a few things a month, I would recommend people go in that direction, because that is going to take care of a lot of the headaches. And then that grows from there, then consider your options. Do you want to continue to use that platform? Do you want to have your own website? Do you want to move to your own payment buttons, get your own e-commerce merchant account? So as your business grows, you have a lot of other options to be able to support it from a website or payments perspective. But yeah, absolutely. If you're a startup business that you don't think you're going to be selling too much to begin with, absolutely look at and investigate the marketplaces that are coming up within the Caribbean.
One complaint that I get quite a lot from companies that get into the space is the transaction fees that they have to pay. So my rule of thumb is as long as it's under 5% in the Caribbean, you're probably safe. Is that fair to say from your perspective, or what is the trend in that regard?
I think that's fair. So, and then, I think, and I've had this debate with people a lot in the region. I remember specifically going to a Chamber of Commerce event, and this gentleman stood up and said the banks were ripping everybody off, and the bank fees put the businesses out of business. So, there's a little bit of hyperbole there, and somebody playing to the crowd a little bit, but I think you've got to consider what your costs of business are. Cost of goods sold, right? So basic business planning, accounting within there. So, and also everybody is playing with the same cost base when it comes to the banks, the transaction fees. So it's not a competitive disadvantage here when you're selling within the Caribbean. So you have to make sure that you build, your fees for selling those goods into your overall price. So, you don't take the price and then forget about the fees and then say, well, actually, I'm not making any money here. That's just bad business planning. So, make sure that you are understanding your cost of goods sold properly is the first thing I'd say. But if you compare this to something like a Stripe or a PayPal, so their standard fees are, I think, like 2.95 and 30 cents a transaction, roughly.
Like that, yeah, 3%, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then 30 cents a transaction. So, straight off the bat, any of the merchants that are using our platform, the transaction fee is lower than that. I'd love to get 30 cents a transaction, but it's not happening. So it's then the percentage, that's going to range. I think within the region, I think depending on the volume, you might get 2.5%, and somebody could be as high as 5%. So, and then if you're comparing that again to US volume, it's not a great comparison. You're not really comparing apples to apples because US solutions are able to offer their pricing based on just scale and volume. We don't have that level of volume within our region. So, if the companies aren't able to make a certain margin, then the service is just not going to exist because companies can't do that. I was on a call the other day, and for a consulting company that was doing some policy work for a government, and they said, well, why can't we just have a gateway per country, for example? I said, well, the scale is just not there. So we were compared to other payment gateways in the world, we're relatively small. We're a 21 people company based out of Bermuda, and even as a company that size, we need to have a lot of transactions, the majority of transactions from our region to make everything work from an economic standpoint. So if you try and set up a gateway, per country, the technology that's needed to do it is similar to what we have in terms of a stack, and that's expensive to run. So the economies of scale just aren't there. But also in the US, if you're using a PayPal or a Stripe or whatever it is, you have to repatriate that money back. So you're going to be paying wire fees, and that could be a fixed fee, it could be a percentage on getting that money back. And you're probably not going to get that money as quickly as you would if you set up locally as well. And then if you need it in local currency, then you're paying FX fees in there as well. So I would just really encourage people to not just say the US is cheaper. Let's all do the homework to really understand, what we're comparing it to. Be able to do it. And then, I think, and also, if you're selling to other Caribbean countries, everybody is operating with the same price structure. So you're not being disadvantaged there.
Yeah, I think what you said there, that it has to be part of the overall strategy, and you just have to factor it in your cost of doing business and compare the right things. Because on the other hand, you could argue, well, if you have a point of sale, then you have the rent that you pay for the store, you have maybe a clerk that does the transactions, and that's probably more than the 3 or 5% that you pay in an online payment processor.
100%. And then, you don't have dead time in there as well. So if you have a physical store and you're open 9 to 5 and not weekends, you're still paying rent on the space that you're not generating any revenue from. For online, you're doing transactions while you sleep.
Maybe we can segue into another topic quite easy on right now, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also involved in a company that offers point of sales solutions or services. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have a sister company, same ownership, a lot of the same team members actually, called Powertranz. And Powertranz is designed to provide semi-integrated payment solutions for point of sale transactions. So for time and eternity in the Caribbean, you can go and buy a point of sale system that will run your bar or restaurant or hotel or retail operation. And then when it comes to payments, you have to go to the bank and lease a payment terminal, like a Verifone or a Debco or whatever that is. And that terminal is directly fed into the bank payment system, processor system, but it has no connectivity to your point of sale system. Software that runs your inventory and your pricing and your accounting and your CRM. And so and the experience pretty much everywhere you go in the Caribbean is, okay, so you go to checkout, they ring up the price, they type that price in manually into the Verifone, it gets this authorization, and then the transaction dies at the terminal. So then you have to manually input that sale data into your point of sale system. And I've seen it with big companies, like, warehouse type setups. Yeah. And at the end of the day, they're comparing yellow, receipts, and then having to compare that to what's in their point of sale system. Yeah. So, which is a problem. And the reason that happens is because, all the big companies like NCR or Micros or Oracle or whoever that is that's providing those point of sale systems, they have integrated systems within the US or Canada or Europe or wherever it is. But when you try and bring that down south, none of the certifications work because the payment terminal is different, and this is like a 3-hour session to talk about that, but you have to go through a lot to certify a payment terminal through the processing string, effectively. So they haven't done it because the market's not big enough for them, and it doesn't move the needle. You have like an NCR that does like 1 billion transactions a day. The Caribbean volume just doesn't move the needle for them, so they haven't invested the time or money to provide the connectivity. So we have a lot of merchants that are in the physical space as well as online space, and they've asked us for years to help solve this issue. And we said no, because we're an e-commerce company and that's what we do. And then the noise got so loud that we said, okay, well, maybe we can do this. It's still transaction processing and it's software development, which is what we do. So we long story short, we created and built a new gateway called Powertranz that is designed and certified to support card present transactions. So EMV, chip and PIN, contactless, MSR, PIN-based transactions. And we built it and we certified it. And we then certified a couple of different payment terminals and continuing to add other payment terminals to that platform. And then provide a very simple integration point on the front end that point of sale software vendors can integrate to. So now they are able to, when they press pay now, the integration point will automatically talk to the payment terminal, display the price. So there's no manual entry of the price. The card transaction is then encrypted with PCI validated point-to-point encryption. We will send it off to the appropriate bank for processing. And then we will get the response data back, display it on the terminal, but then importantly, send all that response data back into the point of sale system. So it can automatically update their inventory, can update their accounting, so making all their reconciliation a lot easier, taking all that data if they have a CRM system within there, and populate all of that. So that is something that we have recently done. And so we're starting to launch that throughout the region right now. So we have a few clients on it. We've COVID hit shortly after we went live with it, so a lot of people's attention and rightly so, have gone to e-commerce. And just as we start to look at reopening, we're doing more and more there. But we did a lot with kiosks, for example, and that has kept us very busy on that side of the business over the pandemic, because people want to be able to pay for things in a safe way, and kiosks provide a good way to do that. So for Flow, for example, we did a project right across the Caribbean for them to put bill payment kiosks out there with full EMV chip and pin capability within that. So it's the first solution of its kind within the Caribbean. So we're really pleased with that, and we've got a lot of other projects that are rolling out on the kiosk side, and that could be vending machines, parking, bill payment kiosks, a lot of different applications for that type of product. So not originally what we envisaged, but we were able to adapt and pivot to provide that type of solution during a once in 100-year pandemic type scenario. And then now our attention goes back to providing all the retail and hospitality integrated payment solutions within that space too.
Yeah, I think from a strategic perspective, probably smart to basically cover both areas, the complete digital space, and then also the intersection basically in the point of sales environment. So yeah, we will see how that is going to play out in a few years from now with depending on how the whole pandemic thing develops. Before we wrap this up, any final thoughts from your sides, and where can people find you when they want to learn more about your services?
Yeah, I think the final thought is that I think the region is well positioned to be able to take advantage of e-commerce, and I'm always trying to reinforce that message, because there has been a school of thought up until fairly recently that we can't do this as a region. Well, I'm absolutely here to say that we can, and we have everything that we need, all the tools, all the technology, all the people to make that happen. And when it comes to where to find us, there's the best way is our website, which is just firstatlanticcommerce.com, and all the information on everything we do is on that website. The contact us page is there. We also run a bi-weekly LinkedIn Live series where we're creating content about e-commerce and the digital economy every week, because there's, as you'll know, there aren't a lot of content creators about that space specifically for our region. Right. So we invite different industry experts around that space to give their thoughts and knowledge and expertise within those. So, connect with us on our LinkedIn page as well, just firstatlanticcommerce.com on LinkedIn. And, our phone numbers are on there. So we don't have a 1-800 number, for example. We're not a sort of anonymous, massive company where we have direct dials, direct emails, and, we're here to help any way we can.
Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you soon.